Welcome to the 7 p.m. It's in the book Literature Study. My name is Eileen and I am an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Please join me in a moment of silent meditation to reflect on why we are here, followed by the Serenity Prayer. Serenity Prayer. Serenity. Sorry. Please. The courage of facing with difference. And now I get to introduce Meredith.
Hi, everybody. My name is Meredith. I'm an alcoholic. Good to be here tonight. We are in Bill's story. And if we start on page 1, just to remind everybody, the reason this story is in the front of the book is because the book was written like a written 12-step call. So you could read the doctor's opinion in Bill's story and find some identification, hopefully. And that's the purpose of Bill's story in the front. There's 3 main things we're looking for. We're looking for identification. The second thing we're looking for is the progression of the illness. And the third thing is to get hope, because Bill he started out competent, drank his way to the bottom and worked his way back up. And I was taught to read this as a way to diagnose myself as alcoholic, to find my identification. So what I like to do, we're going to start on page 3, but we're just going to recap by asking, who has something highlighted on page 1? Jen? Okay, it says here, well, the sentence says, I was part of life at last, and in the midst of excitement, I discovered liquor. It was like a whole new finding, right? And the excitement I found liquor in was the blinking traffic light at the middle of my tiny town of 900 people. Okay, and then anybody else have something on that first page? Alana. Okay, I forgot the strong warnings and prejudices of my people concerning drink. Somewhere along the way, we were told maybe not a good idea, maybe before we started drinking, maybe after. But either way, we just ignored those warnings. Page 2. Who's page 2? Somebody else. Okay. The drive for success for it was on. I proved to the world I was important. Even nobody was asking me to do that. I remember thinking, I'm going to show them I am somebody. And of course, it was a phrase back then, let's get drunk and be somebody, right? Okay. What about page 3? The one I identify. Go ahead. I had arrived. All right. You're right in the middle of the page. You know, you finally feel like you're there. You fit in. You have the magic elixir. All right. I had arrived. And what I identify with is drink was taking an important and exhilarating part of my life. Drink just took from me before I realized it. I was powerless over it, and I didn't really realize how much until it was taking from me things that I didn't give it permission to take. Self-respect, a career opportunity, any number of things, reputation. It started taking without permission. All right. Now we're starting at the bottom of page 3. In 1929, and we'll pick up from there.
In 1929, I contracted golf. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to carom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism.
Okay, so Walter Hagen was a good golfer, but he was also known to be a drinker, a smoker, and a womanizer. And that definitely appealed to Bill. And then it talks about how, he said many, in the plain language big book, it says, many people play golf and drink at the same time, which was part of the reason I loved it so much. And then they talk about here, it was fun to carom around the exclusive course, which has inspired such on me as a lad. Bill grew up poor, but his friend Evie grew up, his family had a second home in Vermont. And Bill would spend his summers up there and he'd get to like rub elbows with the rich people. And I remember this too. I had friends in this resort town near me on the lake, and their parents always had tans all summer. Like you were leisurely if you had a tan by the end of May. But anyway, it goes on to say here, oh yeah, carom around the course. So to carom means to hit something and bounce off of. So you get this vision of Bill driving around drunk on that golf cart. He's having a grand old time. And then watching the banker watching me whirl fat checks in and out of the till, he was blowing money as fast as he could spend it. That's what that means. In one hand and out the other. And then it says, let's see, are we jittery yet? Yeah, I began to be jittery in the morning. This is having the shakes from the withdrawal from alcohol, which is treated by more drinking. And he's about 30 years old at this time.
Okay, abruptly in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days, inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still chattered. I was staring at an inch of the tape which bore the inscription XYZ-32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like the Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke.
Okay, so unfortunately, life happens abruptly too. So there's a story about a guy later on that says it was just a matter of self-will and staying on guard. And it's hard to stay on guard when you don't see it coming. And so this is what happened, that stock market crash. And of course, he says here how the papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance, capital H, capital F. That was his higher power. Bill didn't have a lot of money growing up, and he really felt like if he just had enough money and was respected enough for his talent, that he'd be fine. My high finance was bartenders and drug dealers. They were my heroes. And then it says here, he wasn't going to jump. That disgusted him. He still had that determination and would go on. He wasn't hopeless, not only as he viewed the world, but as he viewed his drinking. And I love how it says, as I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. I remember feeling like if I was dragging my butt to the bar after a 12-hour shift, that first vodka on the rocks brought me back, baby. And suddenly I'm making notes on cocktail napkins and plans we're making for tomorrow. And, but it's amazing how quickly I was empowered by alcohol. And I remember thinking to myself, how is it feels so great right now? And I know when I wake up, I feel like, there's such a... And he found a friend and, he had another loophole. We talk about, we get to this place of incomprehensible demoralization, but we bounce back. And that's the hell of it. Because if we could just stay down long enough, we might be able to grasp something and surrender us back that we can't win over this thing. And so he's bouncing back. He's still got some bounce. I remember when I ran out of bounce. And so he says here, he found a loophole, had a friend in Canada, feeling like Napoleon returning from Elba, returning from defeat, right? And he's got another chance. And then he blows that chance. And then this time they stay broke. You're seeing the progression, and he's starting to hit some bottoms, but take what it takes for him.
We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years, or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became an unwelcome hanger-oner at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often three, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumblerful of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder, my mother in law died, and my wife and father in law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point in 1932, and I had how formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did.
They go to live with his wife's parents. That's not a hallmark of success. The husband going to live with his mother. And then he didn't have, he didn't draw a sober breath for 5 years. And his wife went to work at Macy's. And in those days, that housewives didn't work as a rule. It was single women that worked in the department stores. It was like their one chance to maybe meet men. And they especially at these cosmetic counters. But his wife went to work at Macy's, and so he could drink. And it's interesting how it talks about he became an unwelcome hanger on at brokerage place. But those places where they used to respect his ideas and opinions, and they give him money to go. Like, here's a 5 spot. Go to the bar. And then it talks about how liquor ceased to be a luxury; it became a necessity. So he's no longer drinking to have a good time or for fun. He can't not drink. And some of us, I didn't have a physical problem with separation from alcohol, but I was psychological. I was definitely psychological. It ceased to be a luxury. I had to drink. And then it talks about how his routine, which means the normal 2 bottles of bathtub gin, and often three, just so he could sort of, get through the day. And then he says, and then if he did get a deal, he'd make sure to pay his bills at the delicatessens and the bars so he could run a credit line. Worried about buying the groceries for the wife, he's going to make sure he can get his beer, alcohol when he needs it. And then it says he started waking very early in the morning, shaking violently. The allergy is waking him up. I don't know about you, but I used to, as my drinking progressed, I'd be hungover on Saturday, and I thought, I'm going to eat something greasy and go back to sleep. And I couldn't go back to sleep. And I didn't know it was the allergy keeping me awake. My body wanted more liquor. The problem, I couldn't drink during the day because I had to go out at night because that's where Mr. Right was. That's where my whole future was going to change. So I couldn't be drunk during the day because I had to get out there at night. And I would suffer through these hangovers, but I couldn't sleep either. And I never put the two together. And then what's crazy is he says he would wake in the morning early, shaking violently, a tumbler full of gin, a half a dozen bottles of beer just to get him right, just so he could eat. Definitely a strong physical dependence. And then here's the functioning of the mind that's so crazy. Even drinking this much, he's nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. We cannot see the true from the false. I had a friend who lived in my neighborhood, and she would keep coming in and going back out. And she said, I'm like, from where I sit, it's pretty bad. Liquor stores every day. You've had 9 jobs in the past year. You drink in your bed. You don't let people in your house. She tries to tell herself because she needs to be able. She has to give herself permission to keep drinking. She makes up these alibis and tells herself it's okay to drink. But I can tell you that normal drinkers don't have minds that work like that. So even that, this idea of trying to convince ourselves it's okay, that's a sign right there. And periods of sobriety that renewed his wife's hope. He still doesn't believe he's alcoholic at this point. He might have a drinking problem, but he's still not convinced. And then, of course, I love the next line. As bad as it is, gradually things get worse. I think about a t-shirt I saw, apparently the bottom has a basement. The bottom has a basement. The house was repossessed, right? Mother-in-law died. Wife and father both become ill. He gets an opportunity, goes on a prodigious bender. Missed us. We have a period of good luck and we celebrate maybe a little too early. That. And prodigious means far flung. Knows where it starts and Lord only knows where it ends. And so that destroyed that opportunity. And when he woke up, he's starting to get to this step one thing. I saw this had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. So he started to realize that it's that first drink that sets the whole thing in motion. He doesn't know about the allergy yet, but he's connecting some dots here. And so he made another promise and signed it on the family Bible, which was never done before. This is like a whole new promise. Really, 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 really mean it. Serious. Really mean it. And he meant business. And the thing is, I don't know about you, but there were times when I said, I am not drinking again. I am done. I know I'm done. I've had a terrible time. I see the truth now, and I am done. And that's a great place to be as long as while we're down there, we get some ideas concerning a possible means of recovery, and we begin to follow them and live them for our lives. Because the ego is revivable. So he meant it. So does he stay sober?
Sorry. This is kind of like the bummer part of it, though. This gradually things
Working his way.
I'm thinking, wow, this bathtub gin, 3 bottles of it in the morning before you even have breakfast. That's looking like kind of bad to me, really bad.
Smelly.
And that's like, isn't tub gin kind of like what that rocket fuel stuff that we used to have to go to Pennsylvania to buy? You know, it had skull and crossbones on the bottom. Shortly afterwards, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksuredness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose in my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then. And I did. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street, lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Jim would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion.
Okay, so it talks. So even though as much as he meant it, and I don't know about you, but I really, really meant it too. And so if I would drink again after that and people say, why'd you do that? I would have to think, I don't know, why did I do that? Let me come up with somebody made me mad or I was celebrating something or whatever. I have to come up with a reason because I can't say, you know what? I don't have any. I don't know why I can't stay. So we have to come up with an excuse that allows us to do it. Otherwise, was I crazy? He says, I simply didn't know. And he said, I began to wonder for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just. I mean, it says in here in the plain language book, I decided to quit for good. And then it says, this is a problem too. I tried renewing my resolve. I tried again. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. There's a part in the book where it says, if it made us fearful, it was bad, but if it made us cocky, it was worse. Meaning, neither fear nor confidence keep us from drinking. If we're too confident in ourselves, we're not going to embrace the process that allows us to stay sober by living this daily plan, right? So If we're cocky, it's even worse because now ego is running the show and we're not surrendering, right? And he even says, now I have what it takes. But then I walked into a cafe and before I knew it, I was drinking. Later, I tell myself I would manage better next time and I might as well get been drunk then. And then he talks about this hopelessness and guilt and the horror hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. But are they? Because they don't hold me in check. I mean, I remember I used to have to hide out for about a week after a debacle when I lived in this tourist town where there's a bunch of us that were bartenders and we were high profile. Depending on what bar you went to, but everybody knew each other. I'd have to hide out for about a week, hoping people forget the last debacle. But they add up and they add up. And so even though they're supposedly unforgettable, they don't keep me in check, right? That's the mental aspect of this illness. We are capable of having a sound thought. We know we shouldn't do it again. We know we're powerless and we do it again anyway, and we're baffled, right? And it says here in the plain language big look, was I crazy? I began to wonder if I was, since I seemed to have absolutely no control over my own act. And that's because all actions are preceded by thought, and we can't control our thoughts. And even if we can, we believe the ones that are lies. So our mental state is bad news. And then it talks about is my brain's going 100 miles a minute. I was convinced that something terrible was about to happen. The feeling of that other shoe gonna drop. You know that one? 2 years after I stopped drinking, every time my boss called and I saw his name on my phone, I was like, this is it. 2 years into my sobriety, I'm still afraid he's gonna call to fire me. So it sticks around for a long time.
Eileen, alcohol. Really, my brain raced uncontrollably. When I think back, this part of the book makes me remember back, and that was so true for me. And to come in here and see that other people had that, it had the same effect on all of us or most of us. Kind of helped me a bit that I wasn't just crazy. It was horrible. I hated the next day when people would come up and start, oh my God, like what I did or that I had no recall. I would cringe at that. Like it was really frightening. Uh,
Anybody identify with this? Part of the problem is we don't think we're gonna live like that. Every time it happens, we say, I'm gonna manage better next time. That's the thing. The mental aspect of it is so powerful, and that's where it centers, that we can find another reason why next time's gonna be different. It's not as bad as it looks. I really mean it this time. And there's a difference between realizing you've got a problem drinking to I'm powerless over alcohol I'm never gonna have power. That's a whole nother level of surrender. In step one, it says the notion that the idea that we are like other people, the presently maybe has to be smashed. The idea has to be shattered to smithereens so you can't put it back together again. No way, no how. We have to know at our deepest depths that we are powerless over alcohol and we can't fight this and we have to surrender to that. Because it's one thing to submit. It's one thing to, I think you're a problem and you end up in treatment and then maybe you go to sober living and then but now you're separated from it and it's kind of going okay. And then you get home and before you know it, you're doing as many meetings because no one's holding you accountable or you're better already. And this manner of living that's been outlined that you may or may not have gotten with a sponsor is now sort of in hindsight. And we start running on self again and don't even know it. And we're no longer submitting. So we're definitely not surrendered. You know what I mean? So it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm going to do this and this and this. But there might be this lurking idea that I'm going to do it for a while. And sometimes you might think, yeah, I'm going to do this forever. I am done. But if there isn't a manner of living to back up that and to keep the mind right, we don't treat our mental illness with this process that helps us see the truth and get out of ourselves, we're doomed to repeat.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and it seems to be a necessary state for most of us. I mean, people call it the gift of desperation, GOD. Gift of desperation. And, I'm grateful I had it long enough so that I could embrace something else because I was more worried my life was going to keep being the same. It was never going to get any better, but it was just going to be this awful Groundhog Day of a nightmare that I could. And my fear of dying was, every now and then, like, should I kill myself? No, not now. That stone wall that was on that side road that I used to drive around and see, every now and then I thought, if I could just floor it, we could end this. But then I would think, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna be a vegetable, my mother is gonna be agonizing for the rest of her days. And that really, I care more about my mother's response to me dying or trying to die than me dying. I didn't have a lot of care about me, but luckily enough, I cared enough about my mom to really want to do something about it. But then they all kind of converged in that moment we get, that jumping off place. And I'm grateful because these stories, your story, the stories that we can recover. And I think we're safe for a purpose because our stories are also unique and we can help the next person. And that creates a great deal of purpose. Yes. When we start feeling like, what the heck is the point?
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks. Okay.
okay, the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms. For mine endured this agony 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse that the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window, or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I would eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. My brother-in-law was a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge.
Okay. That torture. When I started to realize, man, I really do have a problem and need to do something about it, I had 10 more years of the drinking before I really did anything. And it's interesting how it says, in the morning when the terror and madness were on me, it's like you woke up in that state. Horrible. And then swaying dizzily before an open window of the medicine cabinet. Now he's considering killing. Maybe I'll jump out the window. Maybe I'll take some stuff in the medicine cabinet. Even though just a page ago, that disgusted him. So again, the progression. And then cursing myself for a weakling. Today's term is negative self-talk. But negative self-talk sounds like something we choose to. And for me, it was this obsessive loop of condemnation that I couldn't escape. I started to identify that not only was my drinking thoughts obsessive, but all my self-loathing was obsessive. I couldn't get myself off my mind, even though it was all bad. It was still about me. And then flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. So now he's trying to outrun his alcoholism, even though it's in his mind. And I did that. I moved from, upstate New York to Georgia. And again, it was 8 more years before I got sober. And then he gets to the point where he doesn't trust himself anymore. Now he doesn't really want to kill himself, but he doesn't know that at some point he might not. So he sleeps on the ground floor of the house. So he won't throw himself out the window. And then the doctor gives him a sedative. Ah, great. So he can taper off. Sedative and gin is taper on for me. And, just if it says don't drink alcohol, that means have to. And so that combination lands him on the rocks, right? And people feared for his sanity. I was already in trouble in college. I went to a women's college and they called me by my last name. That's kind of reserved for guys. My brother was going to college and they called him McCabe, and they're calling me McCabe at this women's college because they know McCabe is nuts. And see, people could see it way before I could. And I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. He starts to see that his life is in danger. And so does everybody else. And then he's open to what this physician, his brother-in-law tells him. and they tried to give him some physical therapies that might help detox him, belladonna, a little exercise. But he says, best of all, he met this kind doctor, Dr. Thorpe, who explained he had been bodily and mentally ill. And that was a key for him. He didn't realize that he had an allergy to alcohol, that it wasn't just about being weak willed. And he also had this mental, he couldn't control it mentally in ways that we can control other things. And as it says here, it believed him. And I have to say, when I started reading this big book, it relieved me because I couldn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. And I was in a room full of head nodders when I was reading that book with people. It gave me some hope. And my sponsor said something very simply. She just said, if you think you're alcoholic and if you do what's outlined in this book and if you do what I did, you'll get what I've got. And I'm like, I got to try it. I'm sure I was a little suspicious, but I didn't have anything else to lose at that point. And so he learns about the problem. And it says his incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained because a lot of us do get to that point where we desperately want to stop. And see, thinking that understanding is going to be the clincher. That's the linchpin. But that'd be the same as going to the car shop and finding out you need a new catalytic converter and you drive away saying, thanks a lot. Thanks for telling me I need a new one. I'll see you later. And not getting, right? I know the problem, but I'm not fixing it. All right. And then it talks about this old saying, for 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. So the goose hung high is an old 18th century expression, which meant not a cloud on the horizon. Because when there's no clouds on the horizon, geese can fly high up in the sky. But when there's clouds, they have to fly below the clouds in the bad weather. So there's no bad weather on the horizon. All things look good, which is another time we decide to go to the hospital. They're great. I think I'll go back to the same as that. And so he says here, surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. And that's why I know a lot of us will go to treatment centers. We get a lot of that information, don't we? Don't you get stuff written on whiteboards with all kinds of chemical reactions? And yeah. And did that do? No, because we're sitting here. Because we're the problem. There's something wrong with us. We got to fix what's wrong with us.
Yeah, Eileen, alcoholic. I quit for a number of years on the knowledge that it was the first drink that got me drunk. And I put down, there was a lot that led up to that. And I'm like, I had a father who had quit drinking. He didn't do work any program or anything.
And he was delightful.
Oh, he was really restless, irritable, and discontented all the time. Which when I finally drank again after being my father for 7 years, it was a blessing that I drank again because then I was really willing to do the work. And I didn't quite understand the work when I believed in God. So I'm like, I got faith. Okay, I'm powerless. My lesson manager, well, I believe in God. I made a decision. I just didn't have first drink. I didn't know anything about a sponsor. I don't know if I heard it and just didn't want to hear it, or I wasn't ready to hear it, or what. And that's why I tell people when I, finally got willing and came in, you can't do it alone. You have to have accountability from a sponsor. You need somebody to call you out on your shit. You do. And I mean, she did that when I finally came back. And she really did. It kind of woke me up because we can live in that denial thing, that everything is all right. So I never, for 7 years, I didn't drink by having one drink, but without any kind of the day came. I mean, the night I drank, it wasn't like, screw it, I'm giving up 7 years, whatever. It just, a tray of champagne went by and I took one off. And then immediately I was back to where I was 7 years earlier. I mean, there was no I totally overdrank. Don't go out on champagne, okay? It's not good. I was sick for like days and then that wasn't so bad and I just kept drinking until I was ready to do the work. So, anyway.
Under the self-knowledge thing, it says here, I put in here, I know the problem, but I can't access the knowledge. Somehow I can't dig deep enough to use what I know. And there's something else. Oh, Alex, did you want to say something? Thank you. Yeah. What was the line we'll get into next week? Let's do one more paragraph real quick.
Okay. It was not for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would end with heart failure during delirium tremors, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum.
Okay. So the frightful day. We're not really partying if we're trying that desperate experiment. There's that tennis match going on. I know I can't drink. This is going to be bad, but I can't not drink. You know, that idea of drinking beyond your will really starts to hit home. I remember that frightful day. I swore I wasn't going to drive into that bar on a Sunday night again. It's funny because my sponsor started this meeting. We used to have just one meeting Saturday mornings, and she started the Sunday night meeting downstairs just for her sponsees. But people kept showing up. There's really been book study out in the basement. So finally, you brought it upstairs, and then she stopped coming, and she goes, "You can run it." I'm like, "Greg, you know what? It's the night I used to have that desperate drink. You know, the one night where I said, I'm not going to drink like this. I'm just not." And I couldn't not do it. And I hated it. And that's when I started to really understand the full gravity of my problem. So the frightful day comes again. And the curve of the declining moral and bodily health, that happened too. And then to start see the, the wearying and despairing family. This is July 1934. He was born in 1895. So how old is he? 41 or something? So he's finally getting it, but he's been drinking alcoholically since he was 20 years old. That's 20 years. As for a lot of us, that's our story. It just takes what it takes. And I'll leave it with this. At the back of the book, I love this. It talks about those appendices. We read those when we're the forward of the second edition because it references the people of medicine that helped us and the religion that helped us. And it talks about, and we know this is a spiritual program. And just even using word spiritual really was a new thing in the 20s and 30s. There was a really groundbreaking exploration into other things spiritual. And what it talks about is great. I'm not going to find it. Okay, the religious view of AA is on page 572. He says this thing, Edward Dowling says this thing, which is a little bit confusing. He says, Alcoholics Anonymous is natural. It is natural at the point where nature comes closest to the supernatural, namely in humiliations and in subsequent humility. So what they're saying is our worldly instincts take us to the point where we start to seek a higher power because of all the humiliations we've suffered. And only that renders the humility. I don't know about you, but it wasn't that first humiliating experience, and it wasn't the 10th, and it wasn't the 20th. It was 28 years of humiliating experience that finally broke the camel's back. So as we say in Alcoholics Anonymous, it takes what it takes. Keep coming back. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Meredith. Okay.